Hi everybody, I'm Jim.
I'm Alex.
This is the Old Warlock.
It is.
Every now and then here on the Old Warlock we come across a product or a company that makes a product that we feel we want to share.
It's true.
And we have such a thing today. I spent a lot of time on Drive-Thru-RPG. For those of you who are not familiar with Drive-Thru-RPG, just go to drivethrurpg.com. That's drive, T-H-R-U, RPG.com. They have no end of things.
It is quite the website.
It really is. You can pick up old modules. You can pick up their new prints of old modules. You can get PDFs of said modules. You can get no end of things from individual creators, people who make modules of their own, people who make campaign settings of their own. You can spend hours going through, depending on what you're looking for, you can spend hours going through there. They even have a lot of the 3D print models that I make. I've gotten those through Drive-Thru-RPG. Well, I get a newsletter, or an alert, I guess is probably a better way to put it, of products that I have signed up to be made aware of. I get this alert from Drive-Thru-RPG sometimes a couple times a week. And recently I had something come through that announced a little bit of a sale from a company called Raging Swan Press. Mm-hmm. And they were selling something that they called a dungeon backdrop. And it was marked down from, I think the price was $4.50 to $3.50. And it was marketed as something that was applicable to OSR, or Old School Renaissance rules, AD&D rules, just basically old school stuff. And so I thought, well, I'm going to give this a try. $3.50, how can I go wrong? And I was really pleasantly surprised at how good the products and the company, Raging Swan Press, seemed to be. And so we thought that today we would talk about Raging Swan Press and hopefully encourage you to go and check them out. Because if you are looking for things to supplement your game, I think they may have something that can help you out with that.
There's a good chance.
Let's take a look at Raging Swan Press.
Let's do it.
So what I downloaded from Raging Swan Press was something called a dungeon backdrop. And in this case, it was called The Ruin of Bleak Hill. I got it as a PDF, but I've printed it off just to make it easier to talk about. But I'm going to read just a couple of things to give you a sense of the company itself. Here on the very first page, they write, "You are a GM, but you are busy. You want to write your own modules, but you just don't have the time, and you don't want to use commercial modules. You want to make your campaign your own. That's where the dungeon backdrop line comes in. Each dungeon backdrop presents a fully fleshed out and lovingly detailed self-contained dungeon, ready for you to use as you see fit. Stock the dungeon with your own monsters and perhaps their treasure, decide their backstory, and you are good to go." And I love this little catch line here, dungeon backdrops. We describe the dungeon, you add the monsters. Now, going way back, I am not a person who has really wanted to use commercially produced modules.
No.
Way back, I think I had two, back in the days when modules were all the rage. And I understand why people would want to use them, because it makes it easier to flesh out your campaign and add more detail to it. But to me, I always wanted to create those things myself. So even way back, when I had a module given to me by a friend or something, I rewrote 30 or 40% of it, because I had to do that in order to make it have the flavor, the feel of my campaign. As I've gotten older, I've recognized the value of modules, but I still change them 30, 40, sometimes 50%. Sometimes I only use the setting itself and I toss everything else out that came with the module to begin with.
Yeah.
So really, when I got this dungeon backdrop, Ruin of Bleak Hill, and it was described as something that you fill in all of the monsters, I was really pleased to see that was the angle that they were starting with from the beginning, because I didn't have to get my highlighter or my pencil and cross out things and write and scribble in the margin of the module. No, this is not a beholder. This is 5 ogres. It just makes the entire process that much simpler. So if you're looking for that kind of thing where you get an outline that does have a good detailed backstory, if you're looking for that and then you get to fill in the blanks to make your life easier as a DM, Raging Swan Press might be something that you've been looking for without even knowing about it. But let's take a closer look at The Ruin of Bleak Hill and talk about exactly what's in it. And then we'll move on to a couple of other things that they've done and then give you the wherewithal to go and find out for yourself if it's something that you would like to pursue further. As near as I can tell, Raging Swan Press is run by a man named Creighton Broadhurst. Well, I know it's run by him, but he may be the only person in the company. I really don't know at this point. He has some artists that supply things, and the artwork in this is really good.
It's very cool.
But he's also got people who do maps for him. But I think the overall driving force behind the creative stories, I think that's all Creighton Broadhurst. I could be wrong on that. If I can find out more information, I will let you know in a subsequent video. But in this Ruin of Bleak Hill, when you go through it, and we've got a good, for $3.50, we ended up with a good 13 or 14 pages worth of material. He starts off with a dungeon background where he describes the location of this spot that he's chosen to expand upon. There is Bleak Hill Manor itself. He expands upon that a little bit, but again, you're looking at 2 or 3 paragraphs at the most. He talks about some other interesting adventure hooks that you could toss into the dungeon to get characters interested in, to player characters interested in starting with it. Mm-hmm. He gives you a list of whispers and rumors that the player characters might end up coming across that relate to this location. Gives a very minimal amount of information on the surrounding locality, and I think that's great because if I'm going to drop this into my campaign, I'm going to be the one who is developing the surrounding locality. He's got some wilderness dressing for the characters to come across as they make their way up to the location. He's got things to find as well as the characters are making their way through the wilderness to get up to the location that you're putting into your campaign. Then he goes straight into the dungeon itself, and he talks about notable locations at a glance, generic dungeon features. In other words, what it is your players are going to see when they enter into the dungeon itself. But then he gets into the more detailed section under things to find and dungeon dressing. And then he has an excellent series of maps. And this is just the location itself plus the dungeon that you might be going into. As you can see, it's not huge, but it is something that has more than enough to make this an interesting location for your characters to explore. One of the things that I really like throughout this document that I downloaded is that he's got a space here for GM notes. So it's a foregone conclusion that you're going to be peopling this thing out. You're going to be the one who's putting in the extra treasures. He does have things that your characters are meant to go in and find related to this location, but there's a lot of space for you to be able to add in the things that give it your own flavor, which I really appreciate. Mm. Then he talks about he goes into detail about the different locations in the dungeon. And he also talks about the different things, the different stories that your characters have the opportunity to find. He doesn't go into a great deal of detail about it, but there's enough detail for you as the GM DM to be able to move it on a little bit further to meet whatever your needs are as far as your world is concerned. Then he has some aftermath components to this module that I've downloaded. So once the characters have finished going through the dungeon, he talks about some of the things that could be happening there. He talks about how you can resolve some of the adventure hooks that were mentioned at the beginning. And then there are also there's a section on further adventures. So things that you can use this thing that you've downloaded as a springboard for further adventures. He gives you some ideas as to how that might happen. There's also a player's handout. This is a fragment out of a diary.
Which is very cool.
It's really good stuff. I haven't printed it out yet, but I think printing this out on some textured paper would be something that would be really good to give to your players, to give it a little bit of added ambiance. But all said and done, The Ruin of Bleak Hill is, I think, for $3.50, something that's exceptionally well done. Well, I liked it so much that I thought I would investigate Raging Swan Press a little bit more, and I went to their website. Now, on their website, one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that, especially on Drive-Thru RPG, is that the thing that I've noticed is that people who are developing their own product. They're coming up with a dungeon, they're coming up with a module, they're coming up with something that they're hoping to not necessarily make a lot of money off of, because I don't believe a lot of people are doing that. They're doing it because they love the creative process.
Yeah.
But I'm sure there are people who want to make money off of their efforts as well, but I don't know that that's the driving force behind the majority of people who post things out there. But I've noticed, I've seen that a lot of people, they're so focused on their module or their adventure setting or their campaign setting that they forget how to market it. And so they've got this great thing that they've poured their heart and soul into, and they set it out there, and they're just hoping that people are going to buy it.
Yeah.
Raging Swan has taken that whole idea of marketing, and they've done an excellent job with it. So when I got to their website, you can buy all of their products through their website as well as DriveThruRPG. But on the website, it's divided up by categories. So you have things that are related to old school rules. So you've got, or old school Renaissance. So you've got OSR products, you've got 5th edition products, you've got Pathfinder products, and you've got things that are system agnostic. And they're all subdivided so you know exactly where to go, so that you don't have to wade through all of the products if you're looking for specific things. Another great thing that they had available as soon as I got there was they encouraged you to sign up for their Sunday supplement. Well, of course I did. And every Sunday I get an email from Raging Swan Press talking about some of the things that they have available for purchase. And they give you full samples of some of the things that you might end up getting.
Yeah, that you might be interested in.
So I've received 2 of the Sunday supplements so far, and I'm very pleased with what I've ended up getting.
Yeah.
This is the one from January 26th, so this is just here in the past few days. What they included with this was 20 dressings for a vampire castle. And so it's nothing too in-depth. It's just triggers for your imagination, which I always love having.
It's a jumping off point for what you would want to do with it.
And I think that sometimes just those little triggers, those little jumping off points, if you can read through them, that can make you suddenly head off in a direction that you maybe you had some, the DM's block that we all get. Sometimes all it takes is 2 sentences to set you off in a certain direction.
They've done the hard part for you.
That's it.
It's that first idea that's often
the hardest.
The hardest thing to come up with.
Right.
But from there, you can go for hours, but it's that first thing that you need.
Just to give you that little nudge. And Raging Swan Press has done an excellent job, I think, of doing that. Let me just read a couple of these. They're short. The dungeon dressings. One of them, the portraits hanging on the wall are old and faded. The folk in the pictures wear grim looks on their faces and antiquated clothes. Cobwebs cluster thickly about the portraits' frames. No obviously new portraits hang on the walls. So right off there, you go into this location, you see all these really old portraits. Something's up, because there's nothing more recent in here.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a vampire who lives here. Who knows? But it's just one clue that your astute players are going to be able to pick up on. Another one for this vampire castle dressing. The doors warding many of the castle's guest chambers are equipped with comparatively new and complex locks. Strangely, most of the locks have no keys in them. A close examination of these locks reveals a hidden mechanism on the outside of the door that unlocks the door without needing a key. Good stuff. Gotta say it. Then we'll move on to... Anyway, that gives you some idea of the kinds of things that are included in this Sunday supplement. We'll move on to one of the other ones that came in with this Sunday supplement, and that is the 20 nighttime camping events. Again, I love these.
Yeah.
Let's see, one of my favorites here. And again, there are 20 of them. Number 4, a sudden wind blows up through the camp, plucking at the guard's cloak. They assume that you've established a nighttime guard or a nighttime watch. A sudden wind blows up through the camp, plucking at the guard's cloak and fanning the campfire. If the guard is unlucky, the wind might even blow a few embers from the fire onto a tent or sleeping adventurer. If the unfortunate guard is also inattentive, a small fire could result. Good stuff. Number 5, clouds pass over the moon, plunging the campsite into even deeper darkness. As deep shadows gather about the camp, the temperature drops several degrees. Again, does this have to be a definite jumping off point for an adventure? No.
Might just get cold.
It might. That could be all it is, but it's going to make your characters think, and it's going to make them feel like they're, should I be concerned about this? Should I not be concerned about this?
Yeah.
All, 20 different examples of this, these 2-sentence dressings, if you will, all for free from Raging Swan Press every Sunday.
Yeah.
2 other ones that I'll read real quick. Again, this is for the campfire dressings. One of the party begins to talk in his sleep. The speech seems to be complete gibberish. Disturbingly, he occasionally pauses, as if listening to a response from some unknown source. That would creep me out.
Which is just too funny, because as you're saying these, I'm picturing them being given to me. And I'm seeing the imagery in my head, if it's the paintings on the wall, or if it's the doors with the weird-looking locks or something like that. It just gets the imagination firing, and it really is just a great place to start going from there. This could just be some lunatic talking in his sleep, or he could be talking to Asmodeus. You don't know the level of which, and that's all up to your interpretation, which I think is just awesome.
That is, and I love the idea of being able to throw these in, and I do throw them in. I throw these kinds of things in from time to time.
No.
I do once or twice. But it's great to be able to put these in there, because then you don't know how your characters are going to react.
Absolutely.
Sometimes one of these little things will make them go completely berserk in terms of trying to figure out what's wrong when there's nothing wrong at all. But to me, that's a lot of the fun of these kinds of ideas. And again, Raging Swan Press will send you a bunch of these. As far as I've seen so far, they will send you these every Sunday just to get your ideas flowing. Another thing that I downloaded was something that, it's a sample of some of the characters/creatures that they have come up with for you to integrate into your campaign. One of them that I was very impressed with was a character known as Coravel Nahel. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that the way they intended, but the character in question is a neutral evil male half-elf werewolf 13th level druid. It's a little bit of a mouthful. But I love the way that they developed this character. And I'm going to read part of this just to give you an idea of the types of creativity that's coming out of Raging Swan Press. The founder and head of a secretive cabal of werewolf druids, Coravel has carved out a substantial forest kingdom for himself, but is slowly losing control of his mind to the beast lurking within. A natural lycanthrope and a druid of surpassing power, Coravel Nahel is fanatical in his devotion to the protection of nature in all her savage, uncaring glory. So they go back and he gives the background of Coravel Nahel, how Coravel Nahel's ancestors became lycanthropes, how he became one. But later on, some 40 years ago, Coravel founded a secretive cabal of druids known as Rannick's Brethren. These men and women, once idealistic young woodland wardens, were corrupted by Coravel's honeyed promises of power and a closer bond with the natural world. Each has now given themselves willingly to the curse by allowing Coravel to taste their flesh. According to Coravel's twisted doctrine, were-creatures are nature's highest form of evolution, the supreme predators. So he goes on with a real in-depth explanation as to how Coravel became who he is, what he does, and a really interesting backstory as to how Coravel and his followers might end up fitting into your campaign. Personality, list that. Originally, Coravel saw himself as the father figure of a group of like-minded guardians of the wild. Over the years, however, Coravel has slowly surrendered to the beast within, and much of his personality has been replaced by more base instincts. So it's not just that there's it's got the statistics rolled up for a werewolf that might have been a druid at one point in time. There's actually a really interesting twist and weaving of story that could end up making an adventure involving Coravel go in a million different directions simply because of what influences him, what he's interested in. To me, this is top-notch creativity. I really like it.
Absolutely, because it's a complex character that you don't know whether you should side with him or not, and that kind of depends on whatever situation your characters find themselves in.
That's exactly
and I think that this is one of those things we talk about, things existing in worlds that maybe nobody will ever see or have any sort of contact with. And I think that this is one of those things that if you like it, you can just take it and incorporate it somewhere in your world. It doesn't necessarily have to be something that is the center of a campaign, but just somewhere in a forest it's on someplace in your world,
Coravel
Coravel is existing
That's
and
it.
living this existence. And I mean, that's just as much for your enjoyment as it is, if you're a DM, as it is for any of your players who may or may not ever come across it.
And he goes on, he finishes this with Coravel's 5 druid minions. So they're not nearly as in-depth as Coravel is, but they're still fairly substantial, where they just talk about what their motivations are within Coravel's group. And so maybe your character or characters, maybe your players will be able to use some of those interactions within Coravel's group to manipulate a certain member, to end up helping them do something, to end up overcoming Coravel, or to get influence with Coravel. You just don't know. But again, Raging Swan Press, they've really done a fantastic job here. In this case, this is an example from their Codex of Greater Villains. And then, of course, they finish it off with a concise listing of Coravel Nahel and what his languages are, what his armor class is, what his hit points are, things like that. So, again, just a really top-notch company that I stumbled upon, really, through an email from DriveThruRPG.
Absolutely.
And I thought that they were special enough in the things that they were creating and the sophistication that they're presenting their materials, the sophistication in the way that they're presenting their materials. I really didn't want to pass it up. I wanted to pass it on to our viewers just to see if they might find some use for the things made by Raging Swan Press. We'll put a description, or not a description, we will put a link to their website in the description of the video. Let us know if you've used them or if you find anything of interest. Just be aware, I've only gone through 3 or 4 of their products, and there are many when you go to their website. But really, I think it's highly worth checking out. I think that so far, from my investigations, it's a top-notch company.
Absolutely. So, again, go down the links in the description. Check out the DriveThruRPG for them and their website. Other than that, check out the links in the description for all of our stuff.
True. Coffee page.
Website, coffee page, our gear, podcast stuff. Again, up and running. Go check it out. You're going to love it. That's about it.
I think that's all I've got.
All righty. I'm Alex.
I'm Jim.
Keep your sword on free.
Keep your sword on free.
Bye-bye.